As the agents led the judge out of the courtroom, Emily felt the weight of everything sinking in. This wasn't just about her father's case anymore. This was about something much bigger, something dangerous. She had uncovered something she wasn't even supposed to know. And now the whole world was watching. And somewhere, hidden in the shadows, someone else was watching too. Someone who wasn't happy about what had just happened. The courtroom was empty now, except for a few lingering whispers and the scattered echoes of what had just unfolded. The judge was gone, taken into custody, but the weight of what had happened still hung in the air. Emily stood still, her small hands trembling slightly. She had done it, she had spoken the truth, and the world had listened. But she also knew this wasn't over. Her mother knelt down, hesitant, as if she were afraid Emily might disappear. She struggled for words. I never wanted to leave you. Emily didn't know what to say. For so long, she had believed her mother was just a story, a name whispered in the dark when her father thought she was asleep. And yet, here she was, tears running down her face, reaching for her like she had never been gone. The lead FBI agent approached them cautiously. "Mrs. Carter," he said carefully, "there are some things we need to talk about." Emily's mother took a shaky breath and nodded. She gripped Emily's hand like she was afraid to let go again. "I know," she whispered. "I know everything." The agents led them both into a quieter room, away from the flashing cameras and the reporters shouting their questions. The moment the door closed, Emily's mother turned to the agents. "You don't understand," she said. "This isn't just about the judge." The room went still. Emily's mother looked at her daughter, then back at the agents. "Years ago, I found out something I wasn't supposed to," she said. "The judge, he wasn't working alone. There were others. Powerful people. When I tried to expose them, they made me disappear. I had to leave. I had to protect Emily." Emily's heart pounded. "But Dad," he said, "you were gone forever." Her mother's eyes filled with pain. "He thought I was. They told him I had died. It was the only way to keep you both safe." She turned to the agents. "But I have proof. Everything I've collected over the years. It's all hidden. If you take him down, you have to take them all down." The lead agent exchanged a look with his team. What had started as a single arrest was turning into something much bigger. Outside, the media storm raged on. The judge's arrest had sent shockwaves through the system, but no one knew just how deep the corruption ran. Not yet. A decision was made. That night, a team was sent to retrieve the evidence. It was hidden well, too well for anyone to have found it before. But when they did, it was undeniable. Names, transactions, false convictions. The list went on and on. The judge wasn't just guilty, he was part of a network, one that had ruined lives, stolen justice, and buried the truth for years. Within days, more arrests followed. The headlines exploded. Asterisk asterisk Q Rejutiayan SCDNDL Shakis the legal system GDG Expo SED asterisk 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 Bravi little jarl brings down a power fuel CONSPIRAC asterisk asterisk. Emily watched it all unfold, but in her heart she felt something else. Relief, sadness, and something she hadn't felt in a long time, hope. Her father was released. The charges against him were dropped. He held her so tightly when he saw her that she thought she might never breathe again. "You saved me," he whispered into her hair. Emily looked up at him, her eyes shining. "I just told the truth." Her mother was finally safe. Their family, broken for so long, was together again. And though they knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, They had something now that they never had before, a second chance. As they walked out of the courthouse together, past the cameras and the flashing lights, Emily held both of her parents' hands and took a deep breath. For the first time in a long time, the world felt right again. The courtroom was dead silent. Every eye in the packed room was glued to the judge, a man known for his stern rulings and commanding presence. He adjusted his glasses, his expression unreadable as he prepared to deliver the final verdict. The tension was thick. Years of legal battles had led to this very moment. Then, out of nowhere, the heavy double doors at the back of the courtroom burst open with a loud crash. Gasps rippled through the audience. All heads turned toward the source of the interruption. Standing in the doorway was a little girl, no older than 8, her tiny frame trembling, but her eyes filled with determination. She stepped forward, her small shoes echoing against the marble floor. The security guards hesitated. There was something about her that made them pause. Murmurs filled the room as the girl, with a deep breath, spoke 3 words that no one saw coming. In an instant, chaos erupted. The judge's face drained of color, his hands gripping the desk as if trying to steady himself. Before anyone could fully grasp what was happening, the FBI agents stationed in the courtroom sprang into action. Within seconds, they were surrounding the judge, their voices firm and authoritative. "You are under arrest," one of them announced. The judge barely managed to stammer out a response before the metal cuffs snapped around his wrists. The courtroom erupted, shouts, gasps, confusion. But the little girl stood firm, watching as the man who once sat so high on his bench was now being dragged away like a common criminal. What did she say? What secret had she just exposed? And how did an 8-year-old bring down one of the most powerful men in the legal system? The judge's face was frozen in shock as the FBI agents pulled him from his seat. His eyes darted around the courtroom, searching for something, someone who could save him. But there was nothing but chaos. The lawyers, the jury, even the spectators in the gallery were murmuring in confusion. No one knew what had just happened, except for the little girl who stood still in the middle of the room, her small fists clenched at her sides. Her name was Emily Carter. Just 8 years old, she shouldn't have been in that courtroom at all, let alone causing a scene that would lead to the arrest of one of the most powerful judges in the country. But there she was, standing tall, unshaken by the commotion around her. The moment her words left her lips, everything changed. One of the FBI agents, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, knelt down beside Emily. "Sweetheart," she said gently, "where are your parents?" Emily blinked up at her. "My daddy, he's in jail." Her voice was steady, but there was a hint of sadness behind it. "Because of him," she pointed directly at the judge. The agent exchanged a quick glance with her colleagues. Something about this was big, bigger than any of them had realized. Meanwhile, the judge was struggling against the cuffs. "This is absurd," he barked. "I demand to know what I'm being charged with." The lead agent, a tall man with a calm but firm presence, tightened his grip on the judge's arm. "You'll find out soon enough." Emily, still standing in the middle of the courtroom, turned to the audience. Her eyes locked onto a woman in the back row, who had her hands pressed against her mouth in shock. Emily's heart pounded. She knew that face. She had seen it before, in pictures, in whispered stories told late at night. It was her mother. The woman hesitated, tears welling in her eyes, before rushing forward. "Emily?" she whispered. "Oh my God." Emily didn't move. She wasn't sure if she was supposed to run into the woman's arms or stay where she was. All she knew was that she had spent years believing her mother was gone, that she had disappeared without a trace. And yet here she was, standing in front of her, eyes full of emotions Emily couldn't even begin to understand. The agents weren't paying attention to this moment unfolding. They were too focused on escorting the judge out of the room. Reporters who had been covering the trial scrambled for their cameras, snapping pictures and shouting questions. "How long have you known about this?" One called out. "Is it true that the judge tampered with evidence?" Was this child involved in an undercover investigation? No one had answers. But one thing was certain, this was no ordinary case. The way she said his name made the hair on his arms stand up. He wasn't sure if it was a question or a warning. For the first time in his career, he felt completely out of control. A car passed by, headlights washing over them for a brief second. Daniels glanced at the ID still in his hand, as if hoping the name would have changed. It hadn't. Michelle gave him a moment to process before she spoke again, her voice softer but laced with meaning. "I know who you are," she said. "I know how you operate." Daniel's stomach twisted. "I've seen your record," she continued, her voice calm but unshakable. "I've read the complaints. I've reviewed the footage, and I know exactly why you pulled me over." The blood drained from Daniel's face. This wasn't just a traffic stop anymore. It was a reckoning. And for the first time, he realized he wasn't the one in control. Daniels felt his grip tighten around the ID, his knuckles turning white. His breathing was shallow, his mind racing, grasping for a way out of this. But there wasn't one. Michelle Carter wasn't bluffing. She knew exactly who he was, what he had done, and now, standing in front of him, she was *** giving him a choice ***. He could feel the weight of his own arrogance pressing down on him. Every bad stop, every questionable report, every moment he had let his own bias guide his actions instead of the law. It all led to this moment. Michelle studied him carefully, her expression unreadable. "You've got two options," she said, her voice measured. "You can keep pushing this, try to flex your authority, see where that gets you." Daniel swallowed hard, his fingers twitching near his belt. "Or," she continued, "you can do the right thing. You can acknowledge what just happened here. You can take a hard look at yourself and ask if this is the kind of officer you really want to be." Her words cut deeper than he expected. The tension in the air was thick, but there was no escaping the truth. ***, she wasn't here to ruin him. She was giving him a chance to change ***. For the first time, Daniels felt something he hadn't in years: shame. Real, raw shame. He had pulled her over for no reason. He had treated her like a suspect without cause. And the worst part, he had almost doubled down on it, let his pride get in the way of what was right. Slowly, he let out a shaky breath. His hands loosened. He looked down at the ID in his palm, then at Michelle. Without a word, he handed it back. Michelle took it, watching him closely. Daniel stepped back, his mouth dry, his heart still pounding. "You're free to go," he muttered. Michelle held his gaze for a long moment before nodding. "You should think about what happened here tonight," she said quietly. "Because I will." She turned, got back into her car, and drove off, disappearing into the night like a ghost, leaving Daniel standing there, alone with his thoughts. The red and blue lights on his cruiser still flashed against the dark street, but for the first time, Daniel saw them for what they really were: a warning, a reminder of the responsibility he carried every time he put on the badge. And as he stood there, the weight of the night settling over him, he knew one thing for certain. He would never forget this moment. The street was quiet, just the hum of streetlights buzzing overhead and the occasional car rolling past. Officer Daniels tightened his grip on the wheel as he sat in his patrol car, parked at an intersection just outside the city's downtown district. It had been a slow night until now. His radio crackled to life, Dispatch announcing something about a black sedan matching the description of a suspected vehicle. He didn't catch the whole call, but it didn't matter. His eyes locked on a car rolling through the intersection, sleek, black, and tinted. "Gotcha," he muttered under his breath, flipping on his lights and pulling out. The sedan pulled over smoothly, no sudden movements, no hesitation. Daniel stepped out, adjusting his belt as he approached the driver's side. He tapped on the window, his expression already hardened. The window slid down slowly, and he was met with the calm, composed face of a black woman, her eyes steady and unreadable. She didn't fumble, didn't look nervous like most people did when stopped by an officer at night. "License and registration," he said, his voice firm, watching her every move. The woman didn't flinch. Instead, she exhaled lightly and reached into her glove compartment, retrieving a neatly stacked set of documents. She held them out, her gaze unwavering. Daniel snatched them up, glancing at her license. His eyes skimmed over her name, barely paying attention, until something caught his eye. His brows knitted together. "Ma'am, what's your business out here tonight?" He pressed, his tone carrying an edge of suspicion. "I could ask you the same," she replied smoothly, her voice even. Daniels felt his irritation spike. Something about the way she spoke, the way she carried herself, it made him uneasy. He stepped back, flipping through her documents again, this time really looking at the name and title printed on the ID. Then it hit him. His breath hitched. The name staring back at him wasn't just anyone. It wasn't some random driver he could intimidate or lecture. It was *** Captain Michelle Carter ***, *** head of Internal Affairs ***. His throat went dry. And that's when he realized this stop was about to go terribly wrong. Daniel's pulse pounded in his ears. He swallowed hard, his fingers tightening around Captain Michelle Carter's ID, as if he could somehow change the name staring back at him. This wasn't just another routine stop. This wasn't someone he could intimidate or dismiss. This was internal affairs, his worst nightmare. For a split second, he debated how to play it. Should he pretend he hadn't seen the name? Should he let her go and walk away? But his pride wouldn't let him. Not yet. He cleared his throat, forcing his usual authoritative tone. "Step out of the vehicle, ma'am." Michelle raised an eyebrow. There was something unreadable in her expression, something that made him uneasy. But she didn't argue. Instead, she unbuckled her seatbelt and pushed the door open, stepping out with a composed grace that made Daniel's stomach twist. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't afraid. She was watching him, studying him. He forced himself to keep his stance firm. "Hands where I can see them." She exhaled slowly, lifting her hands slightly, not in surrender, but in patience. "I'd like to know why I was stopped, officer." Daniels hesitated. He didn't have a real answer. He had pulled her over on instinct, on gut feeling. No bias. A quiet, bitter thought crept into his mind, one he didn't want to face. Had he only stopped her because she was a black woman in a nice car? He pushed that thought away. He needed control. "Suspicious vehicle," he said flatly, ignoring the fact that she hadn't been speeding, hadn't broken a single law. Michelle's lips pressed together, and for the first time, there was a flicker of something colder in her eyes. She knew. "You ran my plates yet?" she asked, tilting her head slightly. Daniel stiffened. Of course he hadn't. If he had, dispatch would have told him exactly who she was. His silence was all the answer she needed. She sighed and crossed her arms. "You didn't, did you?" Daniels clenched his jaw. He could feel the walls closing in, the weight of his mistake pressing down on him. But he wasn't ready to back down. "Ma'am, I need you to turn around," he ordered, reaching for his radio. But before he could call it in, Michelle took a slow step closer, lowering her voice just enough that only he could hear. "Are you sure about that, Officer Daniels?"